So it's good to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim again, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah one more time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, brothers. And as I was saying that today we are going to discuss a topic which I think it's of high importance and significance, because this is going to shape up the new world financial order. People usually talk about the world order in terms of the political world order, the European countries, Britain, France, China, Russia. That's what usually we are accustomed to. But there is yet one more world order which is of almost similar importance and significance. This is the monetary financial world order. So we need to understand this and see what's going on here and what is being shaped as we speak. Some timeline. Let me go back for the gold and anti-gold standard that was at the time of before the Second World War. Throughout the history, there has always been a main standard for currency, which was the gold and silver. And that standard used to be interrupted every now and then because of wars, because of conflicts. But nevertheless, the gold continued to be a standard for the monetary system, which made a base for how money is used. It was since the old ages, the Roman, Persian empires, the Greeks before that, and then the Islamic State, all the way through until the end of the last century or the beginning of 2000s, and then continued until the Second World War. During the Second World War, Germany especially printed so much marks, which used to be the German currency, is the mark, more than it has gold. So this was they inflated the world market with money without any base. Again, as I said, this is a war situation. As soon as the war ended, then the world powers who won the war, especially United States and Europe, they met in Bretton Woods, which is a small town next to Washington, D.C., in 1944, and they asserted one more time, and they put bases for a new world order in terms of money. And they invented the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and those two banks are they play a very significant role in today's political as well as economic situation. Almost every country in the world, especially the third world countries, is in debt to the World Bank in support of the IMF, and their currencies are controlled totally, the value of their currencies, by the International Monetary Fund, which was set in 1944 to be the one that looks after the currencies and the money, how much your money is going to value. And they created many tools for that. Analysis tools, systems, companies, corporations who can do that. So until 1944, or since 1944, we have the Bretton Woods Agreement, which created the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the GATT, which is the Trade and Tariff World Agency, recently converted into what they call the WTO, the World Trade Organization. So there are three major organizations: World Trade Organization. This is the one that set the rules and regulations, how countries are going to trade among each others, which country is allowed to send money and to receive money across the borders, and so on. This is very, very critical organization. World Bank is the one that decides who is going to get the loan, and if you don't want to take their loan, they will force you to take a loan. And this is very ironic. Sometimes you say, oh, people struggle to get a loan. This is okay. You struggle to get a loan to negotiate the conditions, but if you say, I don't want your loans, they will force you. And I remember Sudan, there was a time, which Sudan is a very poor country, decided, especially at the beginning, when the previous president, what was his name, Othman, something, uh, of Sudan, when he became a president, he said, no longer World Bank loans. We are going to rely on our own resources. Then later on, a few years later, he actually admitted in a press conference, he said, we were forced to take a loan from the World Bank. And today, of course, Sudan is one of the largest, the countries which has one of the largest loans from the World Bank. So the World Bank, IMF, World Trade Organization, and on top of that, they had the gold standard. And the gold standard, they said each and every country in the world must have their standards, their currency matched against the dollar. And the dollar is matched against gold. So they put the standard, which is 1 ounce of gold, 1 ounce of gold equal $35, plus minus 3 to 5%. They allow it for fluctuation in prices, in manufacturing of gold, in shipping, and that's normal. But in general, $35 equal 1 ounce of gold, British pound, French franc, German mark, Japanese yen, and so on. All of these currencies, you would convert them into dollar in order to convert them, their value into gold, which was agreed upon, because the dollar in this case is well defined based on gold. So there is no problem. So let's say if the pound equals $3, that means the pound equal, how much is the dollar in terms of gold? It's 0.03 of the ounce. So the pound will be 0.9, which is almost 9% of the ounce of a gold. That's how the standard. And everybody was happy. Now, so this is Bretton Woods, which shows here, 1944. After that, now the Second World War brought also miseries to the world. One of the miseries is that Europe, which is the ally of the United States, is completely destroyed. You know, when you say destroyed, that means the German troops, wherever they went into a town, they just annihilated that. They did not, just like what you see in Gaza today, tanks go, they wipe everything in front of them. That's how the German used to do in France, in Belgium, in Holland, in places where they went into what else is there. All of these, Austria, Italy, they destroyed whatever they could destroy. So now this has to be rebuilt. And who's going to rebuild that? United States is the country that came victorious, and its resources are still virgin, have not been depleted, did not spend too much money on the war, actually. And whenever they were pressed for some action, they used their nuclear power, and they ended up the war. So United States was capable of funding Europe. They created a plan, they called it the Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan means that United States is committed to supply Europe with all the money it needs to rebuild its structure, its economy, its industry, so that it can become ally to the United States in the new alliance, which is called the NATO, the North Atlantic Alliance of the countries. So the Marshall Plan, within 3 to 4 years, have pumped into Europe more than $12 billion. $12 billion at the time is quite a bit of money. It's quite a bit of money. In today's term, $12 billion is equal to around $250 billion. And that is, in compared to gold, it will consume lots and lots of the gold resources in the United States. So if Europe would start using this money, these dollars that accumulated in its banks, and will convert it into dollars, and from dollar to gold, that means this could deplete the gold reserves in the United States. So this was a dilemma. A dilemma. United States found out that if we continue to use our money to fund Europe and to build our new states that are going to be allies to the United States, and if we continue to struggle with the Soviet Union was not part of this treaty. Soviet Union was out of the treaty. They used their rubles, and their rubles is not measured against the dollar in any way. And it's not convertible. You could not convert rubles into dollars. Now, just to sidetrack here, at the time when I was studying in the Soviet Union in the early 70s, if the Soviet Union wanted to buy anything from the West, they would print different ruble, and they call it the golden ruble, which is a ruble that is measured according to the standard of the WTO and the Bretton Woods, so that they can use it to buy anything from Japan or from any other country in the world. But in general, the Soviets would use their ruble, which is absolutely unrelated to the dollar. So, having said that, United States by the early 70s realized the following. If we continue to make the dollar measured against gold, we will run out of gold. Actually, literally, physically, we'll run out of gold. Now, they do have big mines, but the total amount of gold that they have probably will be depleted in less than 50 or 60 years. And if we don't, if we want to be low in the production of dollars, we will not be able to cope up with the industrial revolution and the growth rate and so on. So Nixon in 1971 makes a decision. Let's break away from the Bretton Woods Agreement. And this is the 1971 abort the gold standard. It's a milestone. It's a very, very big milestone in the history of mankind. This whole historical motion of the world until 1971, gold standard was a de facto standard. No one has ever envisioned or thought that we can produce money not based on gold or silver, for that matter. For silver, because that's what the Islamic State and the Muslim world used to have, both gold and silver, and in some cases for some other metal, for like copper, for very little, like buying a cup of coffee. You are not going to spend a coin in gold, which is 0.0001 gram, and make it in order to buy coffee. So they make some other things. But aside from that, until 1971, the world did not know any standard for money but gold. 1971, Nixon decides, let's break away from that. And Nixon is the president of the United States, the world superpower. Its opponent, Soviet Union, has nothing to do with the gold standard, and it's not part of that. So it's not going to face any issue with this. If the Soviet Union at the time was part of the gold standard, the international, probably it would have caused a challenge. But it was not. That's a fact. So 1971, we are away from the gold standard. Now, how are we going to print dollars? On what basis? So this comes the next question. We'll just print dollars without any attachment. Eventually things can go out of hand. So let's find a replacement. Let's find a replacement. And that thought about replacement, United States thought that what other material or a resource similar to gold, which exists in very large resources, and that we can have control over, so that we can make it a base for the dollar. The first thing comes to their mind, oil, petrol, oil. Oil exists in very large quantities. The reserves of oil continues for tens or 50 or hundreds of years from that time. And the resources of oil are in very well-defined countries. At that time, there was a group called OPEC, the oil-producing and exporting countries, the countries that produce and export oil, very limited number. Many of them in the Muslim world, very few outside, led by Saudi Arabia. So that was an intriguing type of concept. What if we can use oil as a backup for our dollar? In other words, we will not be printing dollars for nothing, which is by the way, let me, for the sake of the people on the left hand side who are the very young ones, these guys are done now with that. So I keep talking to you. These guys are relevant here. so so the idea here is that the United States at the time, in terms of thinking about oil, is that number one, this is not like gold. It does not require too much manufacturing. Remember, gold exists almost in so many places, but sometimes in smaller quantities. So the cost of producing gold and creating it in what do you call it, the bars, gold bars, it's very expensive. So it might not be might not be feasible. So, but oil can be, once you have the oil well, it can produce things in millions of barrels automatically, and it's not going to cost as much as the gold. So it's a perfect choice. And the countries that produce the oil will find a way politically to dominate these countries, so we can guarantee the supply of oil, and with some other tricks also. So now between 71 and 74, note that 74, the United States makes an agreement with the Saudi King Faisal. Let's make sure that the oil sold by Saudis and by the OPEC countries, the organization of petrol, export and producing and exporting oil, let's make that they will sell oil in dollars only. And if they sell oil in dollar, who's going to give the dollars to the people to buy the oil? We, the Federal Reserve Bank, United States of America. Bingo. It's a very good formula. It is a very, very good formula. If all the world needs the oil, especially Europe, Japan, China. Europe at the time, the main industrial nation that has just come out of the war. Japan has also come out of the war, industrial nation. China is big. It's not industrial then, but it's big. China, India, in terms of people. So they need energy at least to run the vehicles they buy from America, and to run the factories that the Americans can sell them. So they need the oil. So almost everyone needs the oil, and the biggest countries that need the oil, they don't have it. So they have to buy it. Now, if we can make the sale of oil only in dollar, so now we have guaranteed that we can produce as much dollars as possible. Sometimes the people, they say, oh, they just print the dollar for free. That's not true, because the United States knows each dollar they produce without a very specific need, it becomes so-called inflation. And inflation means when you have more money than you can afford to provide products to match this money. Because if you have too much money, and then you have limited number of goods, the prices are going to be very high. Just like the current inflation that took place after the pandemic, and you have seen the rent prices went up 2 or 3 times, the groceries, sandwiches. How much is the falafel now? $10, $11? Used to be $3 before the pandemic. That's called inflation. The cup of coffee. very simple. It's only a small coffee and the rest is water. Today they sell it for $2 or $3 or $4, especially in the Yemeni coffee houses, the Qamariya and coffee house, which all the young, they spend their time there, most of their time, and they will, and they know how expensive it is. Now, it's not because it's expensive, but because of the inflation. So the inflation means when you generate currency without a base, without a reason, that you need a reason, then it's called inflation, and the inflation is bad. And today, even this issue of the inflation becomes an argument between the candidates of the presidential candidates in the US. So we need a backup. Gold, we don't need the gold because we don't need to deplete our gold. Let's use oil. 1974, United States strikes a deal with King Faisal. But then also, why would King Faisal and OPEC agree to give the United States a tool or a weapon? Actually, they gave them a weapon which is more serious and more effective than their nuclear weapon. With this, they can control the economic growth of the world. They can actually control the energy in the world and the cost of that. This is huge. Well, very simple. The price of oil before 1974, a barrel of oil cost around $1.80. The highest price for a barrel of oil ever reached $1.80 before 1974. And before that, it was on the average $1, $1.20, that's what a barrel of junk costs. You know, oil is junk. Oil is garbage. Oil is what you call the diesel. I mean, that oil coming from the ground at this quantity, with the amount of resources and how much the reserve is, it shouldn't cost more than that. So now here the United States comes and talks to King Faisal with a final agreement. Before that, they talked with their consultants. What if we can create a condition where the price of gold can increase 10 to 15 times? You start selling the barrel of oil for $12 and above, and actually it did reach almost $20. Wow. Cannot beat that. How do we do that? It's very easy. Very easy. Number one, we create a war. So they created 1973 war, which Sadat, they used it later on to make the peace treaty with the occupying state. So they created a war between the Arab countries and the Israelis. And in that war, Saudi Arabia and some of the other countries decided out of a sudden we will become patriotic in support of Palestine, support of our cause. We will stop the flow of oil to Europe and to other countries, and even to the US. But the US doesn't need the oil of the OPEC. US has its own oil. So who is hurt? Europe is hurt. Now, in order to regenerate, start pumping oil one more time, we raise the prices. We raise the prices from $1.80 at the beginning. They raised it for $5, $10, then $12. By the time 1974 came, the price of oil settled around $12 to $14. Now, with aborting the gold treaty, who is going to oppose that? Muslim countries? Of course not, because Muslim countries don't have the Khalifa, who says that the gold is my standard. The Abdel Nasser at the time, or Sadat, he was the president then, or King Hussein of Jordan, or King Faisal? Of course not. The ones who opposed that were the Europeans, the ones who have lots of dollars. France, Britain, Germany, Italy, Spain, all of them, they said no. And they had a big meeting together with the European countries. They said, we are absolutely opposed to this to the abortion of the Bretton Woods Treaty. We are against that. We will not accept it because that's against our interest. These guys, they were still partially independent. It's true that they were crushed in the war, but these are not puppets. They are not puppets. These are countries weak, but not puppets. And there is a difference between a weak and puppet. Most of the Muslim countries these days are strong, but puppets. Europeans, they were destroyed, but they were not puppets. So they said, no, we cannot accept the abortion of the gold standard. We will continue to print our money against gold, and we will continue to measure our currency with gold. And if your currency is not measured against gold, you have to convert it so that it meets our standard. So these countries now become the de facto monetary order heroes. And that is what the war has broken the zeal of the Europeans. And the main thing that came out in the news then, and there are many reports, at the time when the barrel of oil reached $19, the United States told all Europeans, now, okay, you want to continue to have the gold standard, God bless you, go ahead. But now when you will pay the Saudis for oil or the OPEC, you import from them, you have to pay them in dollar, $19 per barrel. And in order to pay them that, you have to buy the dollars from me. And in order to buy $19 for a barrel, you have to pay me gold. I accept your money, which is very precious money. It's gold. So give me your gold, take $1, which is non-gold standard, and buy oil with it. And let Saudi Arabia become so rich, and it can buy all your gold reserves. So these European countries, they said, okay, we raise our hands, let's go with no gold standard. So by 1974, two things happened. All the world, including Europe, had accepted the no gold standard, and the oil for dollar has become the core business for the Federal Reserve Bank, which issues dollars against every barrel that was sold in the world market. You need the dollar, you have to buy it from the United States of America, which means I have a reason to print dollars now. Now, what happened? Let's see here. The Federal Reserve. Now, Federal Reserve has a base to print dollars. These curves here, it shows the left one is the amount of money the Federal Reserve prints vis-a-vis the oil. How many oil in the world? Yes. In terms of the sale, like by 2040, this is just expectation. Talk about 2020 here. I don't see this here, but it's about $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. So very simple calculation. If we sell 100 million barrel a day, $400, the price of the dollar today, it's about, goes between 85 and 90. Just make it 100 for simplicity, right? Let's say $100 a barrel. On the average, because it did reach 150 a couple of years ago. So let's say $100 a barrel. And we produce, the world produces 100 million barrels a day. 100 times 100, that's 10,000 millions. 10,000 millions means $10 billion, correct? That's $10 billion a day. $10 billion a day, the sales. Multiply this by 360, that's $3.6 trillion. $3.6 trillion. That's the average, almost, that's the, by 2020, up to that area, and a bit more than that, the average number of dollars the Federal Reserve produces per year, just for the sale of oil, is almost $3.5 trillion, which is $3.5 trillion is not a small number. And usually when I deal with numbers, all of us here, most of us are engineers, we deal with numbers. Sometimes you say, you have $100, so you can count them, you know how much. 1,000, you can estimate. But when you say, I have $1 million, it boggles your mind a little bit. What's $1 million? And say, if I want to buy a car, on the average costs $50,000, well, that's about 20 cars. 20 cars with $50,000. Oh, okay. So I could imagine what $1 million is. When you say $1 billion, becomes more difficult. The biggest challenge when I say how much time do you need to spend $1 trillion if you were to spend $1 million a day? Imagine. Now, who can spend $1 million a day? But just imagine. You can spend $1 million a day. How long does it take you to spend that much money? Anyone who can give me a number quick? How much? 4 years? Okay, keep this aside. I'm not asking you guys. I mean, you are way off here. How many? How many? 25. More. Who can say more? It's like an auction. 1,000? More. Huh? Who's using the come on with the calculator? What calculator are you guys using? 2,250 years. 2,250 years plus minus 1 year. Yeah, that's so you got it from the this is I look, I have asked this question in almost every lecture. Whenever I go to lecture in my university, the first lecture, because most of my lectures are numerical, digital logic, numbers, etc. And then we use the power. Sometimes we don't even use the, say, 10 to the power 15, 10 to the power 12 trillion, right? 10 to the power 12. Okay, it's 10 to the power 12, it's very simple. But when you put the number of zeros, so 10, 12 zeros. But what is that? What does that come into? So when you say $3 trillion, that's not a light number. It's big. It's big, which means you need almost 7,000 years to spend this much money if you spend $1 million a day. So the Federal Reserve was able to produce 3.5 until today, on the average, $3.5 trillion just for oil sale. Now, there is another reason why the Fed prints money. On the right there, the Fed prints money to accommodate for the deficit in the US budget. Now, what is deficit? Now, this is important to understand, because here we have the mechanism that produces dollar, and the dollar is our money, our monetary system. It's the one that makes us super country, superior to other nations. So they produce dollars for two reasons. There are two main reasons for the Fed to produce and print money, whether digital print or physical. One is worldwide sale of oil, which is today stands at almost, as I said, $3.5 trillion. Now, we know that there are countries, they sell oil outside the dollar, but that's not much, less than 15%. So that's not big deal. So 3.5 is not a little money, as I said. The other reason is there is a deficit. What is deficit? A deficit is the difference in budget between what you have for whatever you need and what you don't have. Let's say today the United States says we need $1 trillion in order to run all our industry, to build our militaries, to support Ukraine, to support the occupying state in Palestine, to give loans to the world, to build new ships, new whatever projects. We need $1 trillion. We have $1 trillion, but we need 500 billion more, $0.5 trillion more, because our industry requires something more. This is called deficit. I need $1.5 trillion. I have only 1 trillion, but I keep in my budget, and when the Congress signs for the budget, actually signs for a budget which includes deficit. It includes deficit. It means I need 1.5 trillion, but I only have 1 trillion. Can the Congress approve that? It does. And by the way, it has come as a de facto. This is good for us to understand. The United States created a new phenomena in the world. Why would United States or Britain or France be motivated to produce more goods or to build more industry? What is going to push the companies, the corporations, the institutions to work harder in order to make more money? If we are making 1 trillion, we are happy. They say, we have to create deficit. Deficit means I must build this bridge. I don't have the money for it, but I must. I must get money. Where am I going to get the money? From the taxes of the people. But the taxes are only 1 trillion. So we have to push the economy so hard so it produces more money than we expect. So we can pay for the deficit. So the deficit has become part of the microeconomy of the capitalist countries, especially United States and similar countries. Now, you can always say, is it too difficult to balance a budget? Look, in Arabic we say, مد جريك على قد لحافك. على قد لحافك. In English, I translated, extend your feet and leg as much as your blanket can cover. Do you have that in Urdu? Yes. It's the same thing. Charabike, exactly. So it is it is possible. Look, even if we have in our households, we look at our income, how much I make, how much my sons make, whatever who is contributing, what I get my retirement from here, I get my some pensions. So this is how much money I have. How much I'm going to spend. I'm not going to build a house or buy a house for $1 million if I make only a couple of $1,000. This is ridiculous. Even if you find ways to do that, people, they say you are crazy. You will go out of business and you will go bankrupt very soon. It's normal. Countries like United States don't do that. They say we have a big machine here, and this big machine, it can produce. They push you to the limit. They push you above and beyond your limit, and that's why they have deficit. So if you look at the deficit today, deficit means the difference between what I have and what I need. I need more than what I have. How much? This is my deficit. United States deficit grows by the year, every year. I think this year it's about $800 billion something. So it keeps growing. Now, for that deficit, I need the money. Now I need the dollars. So the Federal Reserve comes and says, okay, I will buy your deficit. You have $800 billion. I will print $800 billion and I will give it to you based on your need. Whenever you need it, just send me a bill and I will pay you. I will give you the money over the year. $800 billion is guaranteed. Now, for the Federal Reserve, it is a reason. It's a reason. It's a reason to print money. In our Islamic fiqh, we say السبب. السبب الدافع لإنتاج الدولار هو هذا. It's like a law. So I need a decree. I need a law. The Federal Reserve cannot print a single dollar without a decree from the Congress. They must have an order. Order to print money. Who gives the order? Not the Fed itself. They take the order from the Congress. It has to be signed. So this order now, one of the reasons for this order is the oil sale, and the second reason is the deficit. So together, deficit plus oil barely makes $4.5 trillion. That's the maximum the Fed can afford to print. Any dollar above that is called inflation. Any dollar above that is called inflation, and they wouldn't know what to do with it. And here comes the dilemma. And the dilemma also comes for other reasons. But one dilemma is when you start having money in the market more than you expected your economy to grow, that's bad. That's called virtual money. Remember, during the the COVID-19 pandemic, the Fed produced $12 trillion above its norm. Today, the people say inflation. Where did the money come from? Who printed the money? Where did the dollars come from? Didn't they start sending checks for people sitting at home? I got a check when I was still in Jordan for some money from the Fed, from the government, of course, but the Fed printed that. They printed $12 trillion within 1.5 years. 15 months, they printed $12 trillion, which is almost 3 times or 2.5 times more than they should. So to have a reason to print money is very important. So now, United States had this, I call them these 2 fault zones. Those who run in engineering, they know what fault zone is. A fault zone, like in earthquakes, there is a fault zone under earth, they call it fault zone. There is a fault zone in industry. There is a fault zone in buildings, structures. You know, this structure has a fault zone. Probably it will collapse in 20 years, 30 years, so you better fix it. It's a fault. They have 2 fault zones. One, their money does not have a real base, and like the gold, which is very rare in the world. Number 2, they allowed the money to grow much more than the economy can grow. And this curve here, it shows the red is the growth of money and the blue is the growth of economy. Sometimes you look at some news, say economy today is growing at 1% or minus, right? When you have some issues with the economy is in depression and recession. But then you look at the money value, there is money. There is above and beyond the economic growth. So the economy is not growing, but the money is growing. Who did that? There was another crazy man in the United States, just like Nixon, who detached the dollar from the gold. This was Reagan. Reagan, he comes and says, there is one more rope that continues to tie the dollar. So the dollar had 2 ropes. So if somebody wants to print more, the rope will pull it back. It's just like a donkey. You know, anybody had dealt with donkeys in the past? You have the donkey, you put the rope in his leg. Oh, you did. So you are my age. So we Taysir Kaman. So we used to take care of our donkeys. How do we do that? We have a rope. We tie the one to a tree and the other one to the neck of the donkey or to his foot. So no matter how much he can go, he will not be able to reach, let's say, a certain tree where he's not supposed to eat from, just within a certain area. United States, at some point, they had 2 ropes for their donkey, and their donkey is the dollar. One rope was the gold, and the other rope was the economy. So the dollar, you can grow as much as you want, but you cannot grow beyond the amount of dollar we have. So we cut that rope. Nixon came and cut that rope. He said, go, you can move. But then there was another rope, the economy. There was a law in America. Look, when America was built by genius people, and they knew how to work. But then when these guys, the anti-genius, they came in, they cut these ropes of the donkey. They let the donkey run on its own. And this donkey turned out to be a very aggressive one. It can eat everything. So the second thing is the economy, which means we look at the economic growth. If the economic growth is 10%, our dollar rate can grow up to 10%, plus minus 1%, naturally. But if the economy is minus, it's not growing, there is no way in the world that my money is going to grow at 10 or 15% rate. Like in this case, you can see back in 2010, economic growth minus. Look, it's in minus, going down below the zero line. And the money is going up to 20%. In 2020, man, 30% money growth and minus 20%, minus 5% the economic growth. Who did that? Reagan, 1981, he passed a regulation and the Congress accepted that, called the deregulation. Deregulation. Now, sometimes you look at these terms, you read them. If you are not in the area, who cares about deregulation? What the heck is talking about? Deregulation, deregulate, whatever. But this deregulation is cutting the rope of the donkey, man. That's the deregulation. So Nixon and Reagan both, they actually allowed the dollar, they gave the dollar a free ride, absolutely free ride. Now, there is, of course, the Fed is very smart. They said, okay, you have to make sure that we have some, at least some tiny little, not rope, just small lines, anything to connect it. So they had the oil. Okay, so now we have, oil does not have the gold standard, it does not have the economy, and also there is the oil. But the oil now, let me tell you, and that's what they started calling petrodollar. So you hear the word petrodollar. Those who studied economy or they had this, at least our shabab, they should know that. I know I'm bothering you with this, but this is our bread and butter. That's what we do. And that's what we have to deal with now and tomorrow. So we need to understand that. I know I'm burdening many of you with these terms, but hang up with me. Petrodollar became the standard, the name for the oil for a dollar, or the dollar for oil, whatever you want to say it. So that it's called petrodollar. Means the petrol is the backup for dollar. There are some issues now. Now it started 1971 or 74. Today is 40 years. Now 40 years is a very long period for any world order, for anything. Especially United States is very pragmatic and very dynamic. It doesn't like things to just to be stalled as it is. And you know that from the car industry. Look, United States, there was a time it was the only one that produces cars. Japan was producing, but not as much here. And they would give you a model every year. No, come on, why do you bringing me a model just because you flip the light from right to left, from left to right, and then you say there's a new model. So they are about change. They don't like things to be stale. They like the people to always to see something new. Okay, so 40 years is too much. Now, recently, we have seen something in the world. Even the world has got tired, or at least it seems to. Let me say, it seems to. We are continuing to finance the Federal Reserve of America to allow it to print dollars as much as possible. Why do we have to sell the oil in dollar? Let's sell it in yuan, Chinese currency. After all, China has a very big economy, second to the United States. So why sell the oil by dollar? Let's sell it with the Chinese money. Let's sell it with the ruble, the Russian ruble. You want to buy oil from Russia, go and buy rubles in the international market somehow, because although the dollar is equal almost 100 rubles, the ruble is trash money. Go and buy this ruble and buy the Russian oil with ruble. So there has become a talk on this, and this came out recently through this second bullet, which says BRICS nations and the New Development Bank. The BRICS are, who are BRICS? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, right? B-R-I-C-S, BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. And these nations by themselves, none of them qualify to be at the top in the world order. But they make a group and they said, let's build a bank, and our bank is going to give money instead of the World Bank, and we are going to buy the oil and sell the oil in local currencies. This talk has been going on since 2009. So 2009, the BRICS came into existence. Until today, they are talking about it, but it's becoming more sound. There are countries that are joining, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar. These are oil and gas countries, so this might be true. And there is another organization called the Shanghai International Energy Exchange, INE. Also, China is leading this one, and China says, let's facilitate the sale of oil in yuan, Chinese money. And actually, they have an INE exchange. It's like the New York exchange system, where they have this like stock and sale. Actually, the sale of oil and gas comes in these both in London and in New York and in Houston, called the Texas Oil. And also, some of the OPEC members, like Iran is supposedly under boycott. So there is a big talk about selling oil outside the dollar domain, which is a sign of danger. To whom? To the Federal Reserve. Okay, so that's a fact. And they started calling this de-dollarization. The de-dollarization. Dollarization means dollarize the world economy. Everything depends on dollar. De-dollarization, get away from the dollar, break away from the dollar. Okay. The first glance, it sounds very dangerous. It sounds very risky. It sounds a big threat. But if you dig deep into that, you'll find that there is something else cooking that allows these discussions and talks to take place. Let's see what's that. The Federal Reserve is not sleeping. And by the way, when we talk about deep state in this country, who finances the deep state? This money, big money, and who controls the Federal Reserve? The largest families in the United States that controls this country. The Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Stalleys, the Rothschilds, and there are a couple of other families. These are top-notch families who have their stocks or their fingers or their even complete hands or legs into all the corporates of America. They almost control all the stocks of that. These are thinking, and they have strategic institutes that work for them to come up with something other than the dollar for oil standard. So they're talking about this analysis. They look at the diplomatic and economic engagement. Part of that, let me mention something. Russia, what makes Russia actually, what keeps it up the ground? Not makes it a strong, keeps it up. 70% of the Russian economy, this country that's invading Ukraine and threatening with the nuclear, comes from oil. So the question comes in for the Federal Reserve and the American politicians, what if the oil price goes back to where it was 40 years ago? Throw it back in the garbage. So it becomes the barrel of oil not more expensive than a barrel of olive oil. Today, it's more expensive than a barrel of olive oil in terms of the size of the barrel. I think it's about 15 liters or so. It's not big, the barrel of oil. So 15 liter of olive oil is less expensive than the 15 liters of garbage, which is the oil, the petrol. So the idea here is, what if we push back this dollar or this oil to go back to where it was? What happens to Russia? It will go down. It will start begging. It cannot claim anymore that it's going to challenge. what happens to countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emirat and Qatar, who are slaves? But there is a difference between slaves, by the way. There is a slave who comes in front of his master when he tells him, could you give me this bottle of water? He says, oh, please, master. Okay, that's one slave. There is another slave who would do like this, please, master. Now, the Saudis and the oil countries, they are from the first type of master. Remember when Trump, he went and he got the money from the Saudis and he called, hey, king, give me money. Or the king or the MBS gave him, this is your money, take it. We'll give it to you, and we actually will give your daughter and wife the big gold, and they actually put that gold on their necks. That's not a nice slave. They don't like this type of slave. You are a slave, you have to do it like this. Okay. So in other words, the United States thinks that it has a reason if it has an alternative to the oil for dollar or dollar for oil, is to trash the oil, to trash the price of oil. Take it back where it was 40 years ago. If I have an ability to produce dollars with a valid reason other than oil. So that's the diplomatic and economic engagement. Until then, they continue to pressure to make sure that this sale for oil will continue, but they are looking for something. And that's why they invented what they call the swap line. And this invention started actually as a thought, 2002, right after the 9/11. They started thinking about an alternative. By 2007, 5 years from that, they started what we call it the proof of concept, POC. You know, sometimes in technology you say, oh, you need POC, you need to test it. So they tested, starting 2007, they tested that. And when I looked at the data statistics, in 2007 all the way to 2012, many of the countries that were tested with, they were still showing zero, called swap lines. I will explain what swap line. And some countries, they are showing $5 billion, $2 billion, which is not much. But in general, the idea here, I think I will jump this, I've shown this, the swap lines, okay. The idea, they say, what if those countries that have deficit, like the United States government covers its deficit from the Federal Reserve. But when Canada, right across the border, or Mexico, on the other side, they have deficit, where do they get the money to support to complement their deficit? They need it. They must have the money. Otherwise, they cannot put it in the budget. Look, you cannot put something in the budget that I will do it when you don't know where to get the money. So what if we talk to Canada and tell to the Central Bank of Canada, we will treat you just like we treat our United States Treasury? Wow, cannot beat that. How are you going to trust us to pay you back? They don't, not a problem. What's your deficit? 100 billion Canadian dollars. Okay, go ahead and print 100 billion Canadian dollars, and I will buy it immediately from you. So here I give you your deficit immediately. Okay, I will give you, let's say, $100 billion Canadian is almost $70 billion American dollars, correct? It's around that. So I'll give you $70 billion. It's in your account. But then Canada comes and says, but you know, when I want to build a bridge inside Canada, which is outside my budget, I need my Canadian money. I have to pay my the companies or the employees in Canadian money. So it's no problem. The money that you printed, I have it. You buy it from me again. You just buy your own money. And I will charge you only the difference in price of the currency. How is that? Would love it. What other alternative do you have? You go to international loan banks like the World Bank, IMF, or any other bank, because you need the money. Because you need the money, it's already in your budget. And you are absolutely obligated to do that. Isn't that right? That simple talk is a real talk which is appealing. It's really appealing. They say, well, we are losing nothing. It's a good deal. What's your benefit, Mr. Federal Reserve? Not much. I will just charge you the difference in currency exchange. And if the currency exchange is in your favor, I will pay you that favor. Can't be better than that. Canada is very happy. And the Federal Reserve now has one reason to print $100 billion. Because printing $100 billion, just like printing $100 billion for the sale of oil, I am not the owner of oil. I'm not selling the oil. I don't have to dig oil. I just have a printer. That's all I have. But you are giving me a reason to print. So I need this reason. So Canada says, wow, let's try it. And let's do, and this is called short-term, like short-term loans, exchanges. Because within a year, and the worst case, Canada says, well, this year I did not need that extra $20 billion. Keep it. I will buy it later on, maybe next year. Okay, that's fine. Federal Reserve doesn't mind that. Then let's talk to Mexico. So they started playing with this as a POC, as a proof of concept. They did it with 14 large central banks in the world. 14. England, France, Italy, Spain, Japan, Canada, Mexico, Sweden, Norway. They talk to countries that they have good dialogue with them. They didn't go to the third world countries, because third world countries, those comes by de facto, because they can pressure them. They have no other choice. But they wanted to try with those big guys whose deficit is in the $200 or $300 billion and above. They are not worried about country like Jordan that has the deficit barely $5 or $6 billion. This comes by the way. So they started doing that. And let me show here, this is until 2020. In the blue is the central bank swaps. That's the percentage rate. It's about 1/6, which is almost 1/6, how much? 18%? It's almost 18% of the total production of the Federal Reserve was due to swap lines. But there is, and this is more statistics, which shows that over 14 years, starting from 2007 until 2020, I think, or 21, the total number of swaps in dollars were almost $2 trillion a year. Actually, the exact number, I have it here, which is 1.7 trillion per year. Exactly, $1.7 trillion per year, which is above and beyond the sale for oil. But it's not as much. In total, what they are looking for, and that's their plan. Their plan is by 2030, which is almost, 5 years from now, their plan is to have 120 swap lines, which means all countries, almost, of the world, Pakistan, Turkey, Bangladesh, India, and so on. You have deficit, I'll buy your deficit, and I will give you my dollar. So you are back to the dollar trap. And the average, they are expecting $12 trillion a year, which is almost 3.5 times more than the petrodollar. The petrodollar is about 3 point some, $12 trillion, it's more. It's about 2.5 the size of their current production. So today we said they produce about $5.5 trillion. They expect within the next 5 years to arrive at the time where they can print $12 trillion, as much as they printed during the corona, but without inflation. Why without inflation? Because each and every dollar they print, it has a place to go to, because it's part of the deficit. And actually, they started the production at the time when Canada needs that money, or Britain needs that money, or France, or Italy, or India, or Pakistan, or Turkey needs that money. They will take that dollar. So the federal will not print dollars without a reason, but they do print more dollars than they do now, without the inflation. So they have now two things. Number one is that the growth of the money grows at 2 or 3 times more than it's now. Number two, all of these countries in the world, including the big powers or the small powers, are dependent on the United States of America for a very large portion of their money, of their wealth, which is, at some point, it starts becoming more conditions on that. You can look over exactly every dollar where it's going to. So that's the next world order that the Federal Reserve and the United States are thinking of, and they have started doing that. So it's not a theory, it's not expectation, it's not something in the going. And finally, I think in the last slide, who can stop that? Who even can think about breaking away from this issue of the swap lines and the dominance of the dollar and this world order, the financial world order that continues to be run by them? There is no power currently in the world that's willing to challenge that, or even that their institutions are willing to look into it and understand it thoroughly. When you look at all the research that's being done in this area, most of the research, most of the papers, most of the studies come out from the Federal Reserve itself. It has not come out of them, whether the pro or the criticals or whoever. So it's all under control. So even theoretically, it's not in the minds of the people of the world today, like whether it's Britain or France or EU or Japan or China or whoever. It is still within the control of this country. The only thing, the only possibility that could exist or should exist in the world is the one that we are talking about, the challenge of the Islamic Khilafah, the one that comes and says, forget about everything else. We'll do it the dollar and we'll do it our own way. With the gold. And we'll do it our own way with the gold and silver, and we will not accept anything else. We will not go by the deficit. We will go with the مد جريك على قد الحافك. Just extend your feet up to your blanket. Before you extend your feet, we have to extend the blanket. You extend the blanket as much as you can, and then you extend your feet. And the blanket in this case is the economic strength of the country and the political strength. You extend it, then you expand. You don't expand before you extend your power. So extend your power and then you expand. This is the strategy how the Muslims, the Islamic State would be thinking. Will not be thinking, say, no, I have to go to war first so that I can increase my economy and my power. No, I increase my power and then I will go. Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَأَعُدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِّبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ. Prepare and move. Don't move and then you prepare later. Don't extend your feet and you say, now I need a bigger blanket. No, extend the blanket because it's part of your ideology, and then extend your feet. That is a type of thinking that no one has but us. It's a type of thinking that we say we have to survive and stick to the gold standard no matter what, and whoever doesn't want to abide by the gold standard, let them go wherever Allah Azza wa Jal will send them, either in this life or the hereafter, to hell. We are not going to abide by their laws. And this is ideological. This is something that we believe in Allah Azza wa Jal for. That's something that will enable us to go to Jannah. And if we don't, then we will go to hell with them in this life and in the hereafter. No one thinks this way. The only ones who think this way are us here in this hall, or anyone who looks like us, or speaks our language, or understands what we say. Because this is true. Because don't expect that in the next hall, the next building, people would be discussing this issue. No. The only ones who can discuss these issues and think this way is only the ones who are in this hall or whoever look like us or wear our shoes and clothing and think like we do. There is no other hope, not only for Muslims, but for the entire world. The entire world is moving at the light speed towards disasters under the leadership of the Federal Reserve and the United States and their life. They are going light speed to bring the entire world into disaster. Who can stop that and reverse the course of history? None. Don't even think for a second. Don't even blink that there is yet another solution. There is none. And research it. I looked at this issue and other issues with pure research mind as a researcher. I did not look at it from perspective, I'm from Hizb ut-Tahrir, therefore I'm looking for what suits me. No, I looked at all possibilities. What is there? And found tens and hundreds of resources, compiled them. Then recently I fed them to ChatGPT. They summarize all of these, tell me what they say, so that I don't have to spend all the time reading. All of them summarize in the same thing. Oh, swap lines is something that the Fed is doing and will probably produce a new monetary system, period. Which is what is being planned. Did not find not a single word or a single sentence or a single paper or a single research that says that what could be the challenge for that. None. Leave alone that the ones who speak this language, the language of swap lines and monetary order, are very, 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 very limited. And if you look at the terms they use, look, the petrodollar, you could make sense of it. How many of us made a sense of the word swap lines or even thought that this has to do with money or with dollar? No way. Now, when I came across this word the first time, I was so shocked, saying, man, these guys, they are hiding a complete world order behind a term that does not imply not even 1%. To the swap lines, what? What are you swapping? What are the lines? Swapping what? Oh, swapping dollars for your deficit? Who could think like that? Who could? Not even Iblis. And that's actually I was asked, I said, in my opinion today, you can be free to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. There is no Iblis anymore. He's gone. He's gone. He just, when he saw this, he said, goodbye, I'm going to where I belong. God, please take me. I ask you to keep me alive until I stand up in the face of your people. Look, they are ahead of me, these guys. So what do I have to do now? So he's gone long time ago. Guys, don't worry about Iblis, the shaitan, the jinn. Worry about Iblis, the people now. More than that one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, questions, whatever.